right, Aaron Brightman, Scarlet Faithful Podcast, and wanted to address all the news that's been coming out, various reports from NJ.com, namely Brian Fonseca, in regard to the departure of Pat Hobbs, former athletic director for Rutgers, abruptly resigning a week and a half ago at this point, out of nowhere on a Friday. And since in the last week or so, multiple reports from NJ.com in reference to multiple complaints within the gymnastics program from various former and current gymnasts. Some of this was public already. Then you have reports coming out that Hobbs, which was initially reported left for health reasons, was also under investigation for a consensual inappropriate relationship. And then you have President Jonathan Holloway, a report on Friday, quotes from Governor Murphy, that he has called for an external investigation of the gymnastics program. So a lot of people have reached out to me, asked me my thoughts on this. I did a rapid reaction that Friday, the day that Pat Hobbs resigned. And I'm going to walk through this a little bit. And the reason I haven't addressed it up until this point is I knew some reporting was going to come out. And I still think, the full story may or may not be out there, but it's obviously not done in the sense that if there isn't an external investigation underway now on the gymnastics program, if there is an internal investigation or was going on within Rutgers regarding Hobbs, there's more that's going to come out. But I think that there's enough out that it's time for me to discuss it. I am going to do a separate episode in terms of where I think Rutgers should go or how they should approach the search now for the new athletic director, Pat Hobbs' replacement. But in terms of where we're at, let's first break it down in terms of Rutgers. So it's always hard being a Rutgers fan for a number of reasons, but we've seen the administration and the university make many missteps over the years. Now, what was always curious to me from the beginning, and listen, I heard stuff right when everything broke, and there's a lot of rumors out there. There's a lot of speculation, and as NJ.com rightly has done, and Brian Fonseca, Steve Politi, and Pat Lanny have reported as well, those journalists have certain reporting and processes they have to follow. And you can't just talk about anything or print anything or put anything out there. You have to have real reporting to back that up. You can't just make allegations publicly. I mean, you can get sued for that stuff. So while I was hearing plenty of things that were counter to the initial reports, and I think what always stuck out to me was not the discrepancy and maybe things that were being put out there behind the scenes, but it was the way in which Pat Hobbs' abrupt resignation was handled by Rutgers. So he was removed from the directory pretty much immediately. A lot of people picked that up on that pretty quickly. Another thing that really stuck out to me is that obviously Greg Schiano was asked by reporters the next day at the scrimmage, and Jerry Carino reached out to Steve Peichel. They're the two high-profile coaches, which makes them kind of the two high-profile spokesmen of the athletic department. And of course, Schiano is going to have to answer the questions. And Peichel, being hired by Hobbs, being his signature move in many people's opinions in terms of his crowning achievement, hiring Steve Peichel, turning Rutgers basketball around, those guys are going to have to give quotes. But there was virtually no social media presence from Rutgers staffers, Rutgers coaches, wishing Hobbs well, thanking him for all he did for the athletics department. That was certainly a glaring omission in, again, Rutgers didn't make a statement that Hobbs resigned for health reasons. This was based on reporting from NJ.com in terms of internal emails, both from Hobbs and President Holloway. So the narrative was being put out there, but then nothing around that narrative seemed to back that up. And as many people noted, if you're resigning for health reasons, I mean, health insurance, kind of a passing down the torch transition period, all these things typically take place. A leave of absence, an immediate resignation typically isn't what you see when people step down because of health reasons. Now, none of this is to discredit Pat Hobbs in terms of having health reasons for leaving, right? But at this point, there's enough that's been reported, and there's enough behavior or lack thereof that certainly I think is fair to question all the circumstances for leaving. Health reasons very well could have, and are part of this process. And for that, I don't think anyone from a Rutgers perspective wouldn't want to wish him well in his health journey, whatever that may be. But it's amazing to me in 2024 that Rutgers and Hobbs don't think that, or maybe that was part of it, but social media, we're all on it, And so I thought the directory stuff was interesting because Rutgers deleted him from the directory, and then he was back in the directory a couple days later. The press release on Hobbs resigning, not one quote from anyone, including President Holloway. It was a very, very brief summary of Hobbs's 8-year tenure at Rutgers, which, very notably, he did a lot of good things for Rutgers. And this isn't necessarily a legacy episode. And I think that the final chapter is still being written. Once these investigations perhaps come out or are completed, we don't know the complete full story. And you can't say you know it because you got a DM from somebody who talked to somebody who knows this and that and this. We just, listen, there's a lot out there. Certainly, NJ.com is doing their best to tell us how to connect the dots. But NJ.com, when they report these, they don't come up with these issues, scandals, investigations out of thin air. They are a news organization, and they're reporting the news within Rutgers and athletics. And let's not forget the fact that as much as the media has maybe hurt Rutgers in terms of coverage over the years, right? Rutgers does their very best in shooting themselves in the foot many times over. And that is part of this issue. So please don't dismiss that fact. But in terms of the fact that there was really no public well wishes for Hobbs, who reportedly is leaving because of health reasons, and all of a sudden he's gone right before the most anticipated year for Rutgers athletics in decades is about to happen. There was no passing of the torch process to Associate AD Ryan Passari, who's taken over. Jerry Carino wrote an article about Ryan Passari last week, and I'm going to talk about him more in the AD search, where I think they should go, because I think that was a great move to put him as interim AD for this year. And he's already been out public facing. He was at the Knights of the Raritan event last week talking about being a partner with NIL and being more vocal and outspoken about NIL than Hobbs ever was. And that's a whole nother issue. But Jerry Carino mentioning that, Holloway should get behind promoting Passari. And so it's like Rutgers kind of got behind on the reporting on Hobbs, and then also hasn't gotten ahead of it by promoting Passari and kind of really putting a positive story out there. So again, there's reasons, I'm sure, some of it, in terms of litigation and investigations, you can't just maybe necessarily come out and say Pat Hobbs is under investigation. That's where the reporting comes in. So Holloway now coming out, and when you get kind of comments from Governor Murphy saying how disturbing the allegations are, Hobbs in the statement claiming that everything went through the code of ethics and nothing came out in this investigation in terms of the complaints of gymnastics, and also mentioned Mike Zool, the administrator, being, overseeing the program. There's a lot that's still going to need to be resolved in terms of internally, and I'm sure what we may or may not hear externally. But the bottom line is we have another mess on our hands, and it's very disappointing. Now, I don't think from a Rutgers perspective this is going to be catastrophic. This obviously doesn't look good on Hobbs. And in terms of his tenure, when I said this in the rapid reaction, and I stand by it, he left Rutgers in a better place than when he came here. And that is still true with all of what's come out since. And that is ultimately how you want to be judged in your job performance. In your time at a place, your job, did you make things better than it was than when you got there? He did. Facilities, we know, coaching hires, getting Rutgers at a Big Ten level in a lot of aspects. Academically, they've done really well. So he did a lot there. But now you have this latest issue, which is he's personally now in the crosshairs. And it's the fourth investigation of a program or within his department over his 8-year tenure, where there was issues with either bullying or misconduct, allegations, but it just seems very on brand for Rutgers that this continues to happen. And I think, to my long-winded point of Hobbs making Rutgers better than they were when he first got here, which he did, a key part of him coming to Rutgers was cleaning up the athletic department of scandal. Following Julie Herman, Kyle Flood, you had the Mike Rice that led to Tim Pernetti's departure. So you had all these issues, and there were plenty before that, plenty. But that was all recent. So when you came to Rutgers, and that was a key initiative and part of your responsibility, was to clean things up and just move this athletic department forward, not only into the Big Ten to be successful, but also to do things the right way, to have an athletic department that fans could be proud of, the university could be proud of, and that was scandal-free. And Hobbs is now departing under scandal. A program under investigation, him reportedly under investigation. So that is a huge fail. What rubs me the wrong way, and Hobbs' tagline was always, we're writing the greatest chapter in Rutgers athletics history. And as the leader of the athletic department, that was his goal. That was what he wanted his legacy to be. And, I've mentioned a couple times now, but last year there was a quote in the NJ.com article about NIL, and John Newman was in there being critical of Hobbs, and other donors were critical of Hobbs. And I thought part of that was unfair, and I thought that Rutgers was doing more in terms of NIL. They hired an NIL manager. They've done some initiatives, but where I kind of saw a red flag, and it really jumped out to me, was a Hobbs quote in that article by Keith Sargent, NJ.com, talking about NIL at Rutgers. This was last December, where he obviously harped on the value of the degree, which is important. And I know there's a lot of old school Rutgers fans that are upset with NIL and feel like they're not college athletes anymore. And that's a debate for another day. But this is just the reality of college sports nowadays, where NIL is a key piece. And if we want Rutgers to be competitive, in my opinion, you need to have an NIL program commitment from multiple partners within and around Rutgers athletics. But his quote was, and I quote, "For the vast majority of these students are never going to go to any professional success in sports. The vast majority of these students don't have any interest in being out there trying to raise money for NIL. They think they have it pretty good." Quote by Hobbs, "I have a scholarship, I'm getting supported in other ways, and that's what's important." Then on the NIL front, it's also forcing students to become entrepreneurs at a much earlier age. They have to be more mindful and careful about their brand. That stunk to me. It stinks even more nowadays. Just the fact that, quote, "the vast majority of these students don't have any interest in being out there trying to raise money for NIL." Who doesn't want more money in any industry, in any walk of life? And money isn't everything. And Rutgers offers a ton of value in a lot of ways. But to say that the vast majority of student athletes at Rutgers don't care about NIL, that was a red herring for me. That did not show me that he got it, and that really was disappointing. And you had the facility survey for the RAC renovations, and it just that kind of rubbed me the wrong way too in terms of those questions. It just seemed very much corporate. I understand Hobbs is under a ton of pressure to bring in money for athletics, the facilities versus NIL battle, in terms of the athletic department being in the red, getting a lot of flack from the academics, all that. But at the end of the day, the whole RAC renovations and the survey questions and the direction seemed to be moving in, it never gave me confidence that fans were first and it was going to be done in a way that would improve the RAC from an experiential standpoint. And I understand you need to find new ways for revenue. But, and I'm rambling here, but this is why we take things so personally and protect what we love so much in Rutgers, right? And we take it so hard. And that's why coaches like Greg Schiano, Steve Peichel, Scott Goodell, that's why fans love them, because they get us and they get how we view Rutgers. And Hobbs perhaps tried, but those two things in the last year for me personally worried me about his tenure. And my long-winded point is, when you constantly market that you are leading the charge in writing the greatest chapter in Rutgers athletics history, and you have one of your programs under investigation, and you are under investigation for an inappropriate relationship. And again, it's an investigation, not found guilty yet on anything. But you have those two things out there now. We see the difference just in terms of transparency with Ryan Passari out there promoting NIL in a way that Pat Hobbs never did. And it just becomes more clear that, unfortunately, I don't think Hobbs was as sincere as he maybe tried to come across. And if you were truly focused and your goal is to write the greatest chapter in Rutgers athletic history, you got to clean it up in terms of accountability, that they weren't where they needed to be. And maybe he will be found innocent. Maybe it was 100% health related from his end, but a lot has come out since. And again, I go back to the way Rutgers handled it, and that the lack of goodbyes, well wishes, it just made it all seem not really adding up in terms of what we were getting and the face of it and what it seemed like. I think at the end of the day, Rutgers fans know that we're up against it, and that Rutgers, for whatever reason, has trouble with transparency at times and staying out of trouble. And they have trouble staying out of trouble, for lack of eloquency here. And We just want authenticity. That's why like the whole jersey thing. And listen, I'm not the most like gung ho, like, Jersey strong and the Jersey way, and people only can be from Jersey that work at Rutgers to do things. And I don't believe that, but I do think that Jersey pride, which I do believe in, and people being from New Jersey, getting that whole quirkiness of Rutgers, it leads to authenticity in terms of how they work and also how they relate to us as fans. And that I'm not saying that, even with that being said, I'm not saying that's where the choice and the decision for the next AD needs to come. But what I'm saying is you come in with scandal to clean it up and you leave with more scandal. And you dealt with scandal throughout your tenure. Whatever all the news and reports and circumstances come out, we're all people, we all make mistakes. But in terms of the opportunity that was there, it's really disappointing that we're all here now going into the most anticipated year. We're talking about all this shit. And it's really disappointing. And I know not everybody loved Hobbs in the beginning. And I believed in him. I did. Again, those two things I cited the last year kind of really made me question things. And I think now we move on. I think Rutgers is going to be okay. I hope that now that this thing is really taking on a life of its own, they can now wrap their arms around it and be more transparent with the public and us fans and alumni and the state and everybody. I think that they're trying to do their best, but I like President Holloway a lot. I like, you've heard a lot about synergy. I've talked about it for the last year, and in terms of Shannon's talked about vertical alignment. Like, everybody's got to be on the same page here, and we can't drop the ball time after time after time. And Rutgers is like Charlie Brown with Lucy with the ball so many times over the years, getting so close, and then the ball gets pulled out from under us as fans because Rutgers made another huge misstep. So I hope things can move on from here. But whoever does come in, we need this cycle to end. We need it to end. Again, I'm not going to get into the gossip aspect of this. You can go on the message boards. You can read social media. And if whatever else is reported at this point, I will certainly comment on. And there's been 3 reports in the last week. So I wanted to wait for kind of that phase of it to come out. And we'll see where these investigations go and how Rutgers handles it. It's a wait and see. It's not good. It's not catastrophic, but it's really disappointing. And as fans, this is just added to the list of all the crazy stuff we've been through. And we persevere, we survive, we get stronger, and we ask for transparency and to do things the right way. Because we love Rutgers, we love Rutgers athletics. And the student athletes, the coaches, all the staff, fans, alumni, the state, we all deserve your best. Nothing less. Thank you so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful Podcast.